What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad recap episode on marriage. Today, we're going to be talking about, you've probably heard me say it 100 times, the number one choice you can make in your life besides following Christ is who you marry. So please listen to this episode on marriage, take some advice, learn some things, step in, ask some questions of me. If you have any questions, please reach out. If you hear something that strikes your fancy, jump back, listen to the full episode, learn as much as you can, take notes, and just pour into being the best husband that you can be, to just learn as much as you can about how to be a solid husband to your wife. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. Enjoy this recap episode. Thank you all very much for listening in. Please, again, like, subscribe, all of that stuff that you need to do, and have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll see you all in January. Thank you so much. I am stoked to talk to Thomas Pfanner. Looking forward to chatting with him. So tell me about, your wife's name is Megan, right?
Yes.
So how much stress did this put on you and Megan while you have these two small kids hanging out now while fighting all of these battles and potentially moving back and forth? And talk to me about the relationship between you and Megan throughout this process.
Megan's just amazing human and so supportive. She's very much naturally, and I say this in a very positive way, she's very much naturally a follower, which works out great for our relationship. I'm able to, like, when she's able to see what I see, and she trusts me. And she's always trusted my leadership, no matter what. Even if I didn't make the right decision, she never doubted that I was in the right space. So, to be honest, yes, it was stressful, but like going through the process, especially having the blessing of having Leela during all the challenges, she was there in my corner. It was never, I can't believe we're having to go through this. Can't believe we're having to move. There was definitely some challenges. There were some other factors as well that were like, man, Eugene just didn't feel like a right place for us to be close to God, the right place for us to grow what I had going with the business. And there was definitely it was a big leap to move and to leave my teaching job, which had been so supportive and such a beautiful part of my journey and the free time that I would love to be able to go. There are times part of the reason I left teaching was I was getting to the point where playing cornhole and dodgeball and soccer, teaching kids how to set up a dodgeball game. This is not my greatest calling, my greatest impact that I can have on the world anymore. And it got to the point where it was really easy. And that's exactly, I left it because it was too easy. And now I have no regrets because I'm growing and improving as a human and growing a business, and how much we know that growing a business can teach us about ourselves and becoming the best version of ourselves. But there's definitely times where, wow, I remember getting done at 3:30, having winter and spring and summer break off, how great of a life that was. That's for me, probably the hardest. I'm getting away from Megan, but she has been super supportive. Now, were there times that there's a lot of tension between her and Charles? Yes, that's probably the hardest thing for us. The biggest, I guess, intersecting collision is Charles and Megan's personalities are very different. He's very assertive and strong-willed, and I'm going to rock the boat. I'm going to be dressing different than everybody else. I'm going to be talking different than everybody else. And she's like, let's just go with the flow, not disrupt anybody. I'm here to support. And he's like, how can I create chaos? And I love both of them for the spirit that they bring to those units, but you could see how together they don't always get along amazing. But Megan's always been supportive.
That's great to hear. The conversation, did you and Megan have conversations before you got married on what life was currently like between you and Charles, what you wanted it to look like, what you guys thought it was going to look like when you guys had kids, if you guys were going to have kids? What kind of conversations, I should say, did you guys have before you got married about all of this stuff?
Yeah. So the number one conversation that I remember having before we got married, when we were engaged, we went on a backpacking trip at Opal Creek in Oregon, which now is burnt to crisp, but I'm so glad that we did it when it was around, was, hey, it wasn't in a demeaning way. It was like, hey, I see this as me being the leader of the home. I see this relationship of like me, like taking, not as I'm going to be in charge, but as I'm taking the responsibility of being in charge and being the leader. And I think that's where a lot of people hear leadership or the head of the household and have a visceral reaction, is when they feel like it's from that of superiority. But when you think of it in the space of, I'm taking this responsibility of being the leader, it's a lot different, right? So I'm as a leader to serve. Shortly after we got married, we were living in Monmouth. And I was super happy living in Monmouth. I had a lot of really healthy relationships. With friends, close friends. I coached high school football and a program that I loved. There was a lot of growth that was happening I was working as a strength coach, and a lot of growth that was happening and opportunities to grow there. A job that had been offered to me that opened up at a great facility. But Megan said, hey, I believe that we need to move back to Eugene for Charles. I think we need to move to Eugene to be closer to Charles, to help him while he's going into school, because he was just about to start kindergarten. So we left Monmouth and moved to Eugene for Charles. And then again, we left Eugene and moved to Redmond for Charles. Again, it's to support him. It's to put him in position. But Megan, I got to give credit to seeing that Charles was, even when he was young, before he started school, he was still very active, very emotional child. And like his mom not always being consistent, helping him get to school, helping him make sure he's getting involved with things and scouts and sports. He needed that. He needed us there for that next season. And right after we got married, we decided to move to Eugene. And that was a large part on Megan. She was the one that felt that would be a powerful.
That's when I hear stories like that, it makes me super happy. One, because to me, and I don't remember if it was pre-recording or on the recording where I talked about it, but my kids know right where they're at. Like I've got God number one, my wife number two, my kids number three. Because without my relationship with God, then it's not going to be great for my wife and I. Without my relationship with my wife being right, it's not going to be great for my kids. Like I need to have them in that priority. And the fact that you two had those conversations already and knowing what's going on and knowing that you're a supportive team is showing that the relationship between you two was already strong and you guys were continuing to put that strong. And I cannot stress that enough to folks. And like it always baffles me when you hear, oh, the man's the leader of the household, and everybody wants to look at, not everybody, I don't want to oversell it, but society tends to look at that as like the patriarchy. And I'm like, there is still like, this is a business and dad podcast, right? So when you look at a business, the CEO is ultimately responsible for the company. But the COO has a massively important role in making sure the company is being pushed along in the right direction, operations are running smoothly. That doesn't take away from the fact that the CEO is ultimately responsible. The COO still has a ton of duties and has a massive leadership role in the company, but somebody has to ultimately be the leader. And my wife and I, like, it's the image I like to throw out there often is Eve was taken from Adam's rib so that she could be by his side leading, not behind him leading. You guys are next to each other, right next to each other moving forward. But leadership still needs to fall on somebody's shoulders. Somebody needs to be the go-to on where it's at. So the fact that you had that conversation, I'm sure, to me, is extremely important. And I think evidenced by how things have been flowing for the two of you. What sort of conversations do you have now with Megan as far as how you're raising your two kids, how things have gone? What sort of lessons have you guys sat back and been like, okay, this is what we learned. This is what I want to be able to share with the other dads in my group. This is how I want the dads in my group to talk to their wives. What sort of conversations do you and Megan have that you are pushing on other folks to share with them?
Yeah, that's great. I really like that you asked that. It's not something that I talk a lot, but there's a few levels to it. Number one, before you get into anything else, first and foremost, what's your wife need? Where is she wanting to go? What does she want to grow? So for Megan, she likes running. She likes doing half marathons. So supporting her. And I remember we had a date night a few weeks ago and they said, hey, what is the next 3 months? What is the one thing that you're really looking to get out of these next 3 months? And because there's a lot of women, I have all these ideas, and what's the one thing you really want to get out of the next 3 months? So like the questions like that allow me to know where she's going, where I can help guide her, where can I support her. And it helps her feel heard and intentional with, the questions that I ask is going to be powerful for my wife as well. As far as with Charles, it's probably the biggest. Maddie and Leela are like super easy compared to parenting Charles because she's stepmom.
Yeah.
She doesn't have the authority that she does. One, it's teenager. So like the authority dynamics, if you have teenagers, it's shifting. It's not the same as when they were 8. You don't have the level of authority of leadership capital and dependence that they have on you is a lot different at 16 than it is at 8. And so they're going to be naturally more, they're going to naturally challenge more. And the skill level of leadership has to be a lot higher with a teenager than it does with an 8-year-old. So with Charles, I was noticing that Megan and their interactions was really cold the last couple of weeks. And I just brought to Megan, I said, I don't know how to start the conversation, but I see tension between you and Charles. And her reaction is like, I don't know what else we can do to change it. And this is actually a great lesson for this podcast. My wife had a lot of defense. She threw a lot of defense at me when I brought up this problem that I saw that Charles and her were not. And are you saying that I need to change something? I'm not saying you need to change something. I'm saying that I notice it and that I don't know exactly what to do, but I can see that there needs to be a change. And I don't have all the answers, but I can see the tension between you and him. I don't want to ignore it and think that it's going to get better on its own. And I can see the energy that you give off, it affects him. I can see the energy that he gives off, it affects you. So after that, I walked away. I was like, man, I don't know if that went so well. I didn't know. But then Charles got home and Megan was in she totally flipped the switch and was like, positive. I was made extra chicken for you. She had this total the shift. I didn't know that's the beautiful thing about the woman is they could say one thing and then end up their actions being something else. Sometimes that's not the direction that we want, but in this case it was. So having the conversation, it planted the seed. And so that's a lot of it is planting the seed of this is what I'm seeing. And I'm not saying to do anything or don't do anything, but this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a perspective and I want to bring this to your attention. I don't need you to change anything. So then when she does change, it's because she wants to change because she now sees a different perspective and she's not forcing her to have this conversation, apologize for this. It's just an organic, it's coming from her own. And that's the best version of her that anybody's going to get.
Yeah. Especially if you're changing for change's sake or changing because somebody tells you to, then the inauthentic level of your change is not going to be lastful. It's just not going to, it's just not going to be as helpful or influential. Do you intentionally bring those types of conversations into the coaching side of the house as well, into the business to say, hey, because to me, obviously, if you're a single dad, then this is not as congruent with where you're at, but the ability for you and your wife to be able to communicate in a way that allows you both to be better parents and thus you become a better dad is unbelievably important. So how is it that you usually talk to / coach dads through communicating with their wife and making sure that level is rising as well so that they can be, as a partnership, better parents and thus a better dad?
Yes. So I'm going to give you a snapshot answer on this, but there are 5 levels to our coaching program. And respect is the 3rd level. And respect, communication, earned respect, so that when we're having a conversation, it's an enjoyable experience. We don't need to go on a trip together. We need to be able to get home and have a 15-minute dinner, 20 minutes together, and have that be a pleasant interaction. That's the first thing. If you've earned respect, number 1, with women, we have to be someone that she can look up to. Are you exercising? Are you handling the kids in a positive way? Are you someone who the outside world and her, she looked up to and said, yeah, that's a good man. So handling yourself first, that's our ownership pillar. That opened the door to earning her respect through mutual healthy conversation. And when you have that, one of our family values, like tying this all back to, this is our own personal family value, it's not a business value, is compassionate honesty. So we know we are going to be honest with each other and we're going to do it in a compassionate way. So it's not, I can't believe these dishes aren't done. That's not compassionate honesty. It's honesty, but it's not compassionate. You're coming from a dark place. And I know you have like all the kids and a lot of challenges going on, and the dishes are done. It like stresses, it's stressful for me to go into like when she works 3 days a week. So those 3 days I'm like buckle up, putting on the backpack with the 2-year-old, and we're going on adventures with the 4-year. Like I'm hitting it hard on dad mode for the time that she's going into work. So during that time, there's might be something that I need, but if I come with the wrong angle, it just doesn't land well. Like you got to come from the space of love and growth. So yeah, compassion, honesty for us. That's what we do. But as far as with the coaching, there's a sequence. We have to make sure that we're taking ownership over ourselves first as men. And that just puts us in a position to be able to have that successful, authentic, earned respect from our wife. There's 2 sections of it. There's being the man that's respected, and there's having this relationship and communication skills so that she feels loved and heard. So those together are really powerful.
I am super excited to talk to another GoBundance brother, Lance Knaub. I think you said you were together for 7 years before you got married. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. In those 7 years, to your point, you probably built a pretty strong foundation for your guys' relationship.
Yeah.
What would you say was key to making sure that you didn't get married in May, start a business in June, and get divorced in July? What did you build growing up as you were dating and courting that led to being able to have that strength together?
A great question. I think first and foremost, probably trust. Just ultimate support. Jody definitely gave me 100% support to negotiate the lease, and that's what we could make it to expand that 6,000 square foot space. My therapist and personal trainers and build this center that included fitness membership and massage. So definitely she gave 100% support, and we always had that foundation with each other. Yeah. Then Jody was much better. We're very different in that she is way better at me at living in the moment. And I'm definitely forward thinking and also just very attention to detail. Yeah. So we had that great yin yang synergy as well to keep each other balanced, which does connect even to the kids, because we definitely have to merge all that together in our parenting styles and approaches.
Yeah, for sure. It takes a lot of work to make all of that happen. What sort of conversations were you guys having when all that was happening? There's so much that the couple goes through when a kid is thrown into it that there's got to be a lot of communication side of the house to keep it rolling. How did that go for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. And Jody and I just didn't know any better. We had everything invested in this 6,000 square foot space. So we were in that space at the time. And we just really didn't have a hidden plan on how we were going to do it. Yeah, it was scary to be away. And I wish that of course, in hindsight, right? This is everything we're talking about for the fathers listening. Sooner they can get the skills and have the mentorship and have more time with their families and not make those extreme sacrifices. And even today, everything's changed. Now there's the paternity leave, and I see this for the fathers, and it just wasn't in place 17 years ago when we had Sage and any of our children for that matter. Yeah, the conversations were along the lines of how are we going to do this? And really Jody became the leader of our household. And I really even more so continued to be the leader of our livelihood professionally in the business. That was pretty much the clear dividing line.
That's awesome that you guys, before I allude to that, was that like an intentional conversation? You guys sat down and was like, okay, you need to, Lance, focus on what's going on in the business so we don't lose that I'll stay focused on the home, or was it just natural that you guys did it that way?
It happened naturally, but it was spoken more or less as well. I'm going to hold things down at home. You hold things down at breakthrough. And yeah, so it probably wasn't as organized as it could have been, but things just became very clear. It did just fall into place, really.
Nice. Yeah. The shift for us when I left the military and now started homeschooling was I am in a world that I never expected to be in. I work from home. I'm teaching my kids. I'm waiting for my wife to come home from work, which is an odd feeling in and of itself. And that just naturally happened that way. And as we're talking, I was like, man, oh man, I can't wait for you to retire because it's super uncomfortable for me. I'm happy that I'm doing it. I love doing it, but man, oh man, I can't wait to have her by my side to help me through all of this stuff. At what point did you guys get to be able to say, okay, all right, Jody, you're coming back into the business now? At what age was your daughter before you were like, okay, yeah, we can actually do this?
Yeah. Jody probably made more sacrifices than would be ideal for everyone listening, because I'm pretty confident she didn't get a complete reprieve from bookkeeping and some of the other that she was wearing in the company. I did on payroll. I think it was way later in the business when, even just for a vacation, she was able to hand that off completely. But she did have normal maternity leave, so a couple months off. And then she came back and treated, and she might have treated less, a little bit more on the business responsibilities, because that would help balance things out. And Sage went to daycare, I think at 9 months. We both felt comfortable with her doing some daycare, which again, I think in a perfect world, we would have not had her go to daycare that soon. And
how did you guys make sure that you guys stayed successful and stayed married after 20 years? Which congrats again on that. 20 years in next week. Yeah. That's phenomenal. What kind of tips for success would you have on that?
Sure, both for you and for everyone listening who's considering venturing.
I don't care about everybody listening. This is a selfish question. I want to know for me.
Someone that we worked with, our business consultant named James Glenn Sr., who one of the first pieces of advice he gave us is, I think we're just a husband and wife business, probably no other therapists, very few people on the team. He recommended that we make sure we put things in writing, that we're not just around the kitchen talking about everything and making decisions, and that nothing was documented. So you really do have to document and treat one another as professional. You can't take shortcuts and missteps, because you are wearing roles in the organization. So really try to make sure you're still following best practice and staying organized. So that'd be one thing. And then, yeah, it was a real challenge because in a 300 square foot room, and we were actually treating together, everyone can hear every conversation. And Jody kept her last name after we were married. So people didn't immediately know we were married. And like our Monday morning, our weekend, it was really interesting. But as we got a little bit busier, I worked Tuesday and Thursday nights. She'd work Monday and Wednesday, and we'd be there at different times. And there were pros and cons to that, but that certainly made a lot of those conversations that people didn't necessarily know, because at first I was even the main thing. That was something that I wasn't sure about initially. But then it was actually a big benefit that not every single person immediately that we were to get. That's a detail that's, part of our story. And then really Jody came up with the idea of just making sure that we had boundaries. Certainly, and everyone's heard this before, most likely the entrepreneurs, that, because we were really working a lot, right, with a startup and a new business and a new family, but certainly once we hit the bedroom and it was time to get ready to go to bed, there was no business conversation anymore, zero. Like even if you thought of something, like, they didn't have to wait. Definitely having those clear boundaries. And then even dinners, just rewinding it earlier, trying to balance the conversation. And rather than just for her to hit me up or me over, did you do this or did you do that? So we'll make a test list and seeing if we followed through on things. So trying to avoid that and just have some conversations about life and maintain the fun and all of our interests and passions. And even breaking away, traveling, and we love to be outdoors. I think similar to you, making sure that we're getting out in nature, hiking, going on trips. And that's part of the reason, Jody and I, we didn't have children for 3 years. We looked at our calendars. We were away. We were really 110% having fun together. And
That's awesome.
we went to, a friend's wedding on the weekend in Scotland. We did anything and everything we could. We really tried to maximize it. Even with the new practice, we were able to break away for our friend Giles' wedding in a castle in Scotland and some things like that. So those, pretty amazing. So those are a couple of the biggies. Just really making sure you're not always talking business. And I struggle with this. So again, like I said, Jody's way back, living in the moment, me more balance, having more fun. I've got a lot of high perfectionism in me. So everything is not perfect. I'm having this working in the background. So, once I had a good mentor, eventually it really taught me to flip the switch. So really know when my schedule is going to be family and wife and children and recreation, and really be in the moment and do that. And easier said than done. It's still,
of course,
knowing that concept and then practicing it is a whole nother thing.
Yeah. And I think that allowing ourselves the ability to receive that, hey, not right now, from our spouse is another thing as well. Hey, now's not the time. And not take that as a defense. No, you're stopping me from getting out this wonderful idea in my brain, or whatever it is. So was that a struggle for you? And how did you guys make sure that you had the ability to say, hey, now's not the time for that conversation without offending the other person?
Yeah, no, definitely. You're right. But once we had our framework, our rules established, all it took was a simple reminder, but it still wasn't necessarily easy, especially for me as the CEO of the business, and probably more so than I should have. I felt the burden of providing, want to make sure the company's well, and doing the pressure of, so again, we were 100% supporting our family with a small business. So these forces are in absolute conflict.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
What has your wife been doing with the kids as far as the business goes? And because she went through the whole thing together with you, you guys were side by side. How are you two now tag teaming this exposure for your kids?
Yeah, great question. Jody is not involved in Donnelly, and she expressed that very clearly that, hey, we did this once and that was a lot of fun.
And I'm never doing that crap with you again, Lance.
Basically, yeah. So in 2021, when we partnered with this bigger organization, she was able to hand off the HR, the human resources, and the bookkeeping hats, and really focus on the kids and the family. And she's been enjoying that. And that's part of the reason she's not interested in being involved in Donnelly. But because the kids have a business interest, she's helping Aspen with his flyer for his washing and daycare. They know mom has an entrepreneurial and business background and savvy and skill. And as biz dads would not be here and be successful if we didn't have incredible business moms. Yeah. So she's lending our expertise and puts her heart and soul every day into weaving all that into to whatever the kids are interested in.
I absolutely love hearing that. And that is, I will very much echo and beat the drum on that having a strong biz mom at home, even if like my wife is not involved in the business at all at the moment, like without that support at home, without somebody who is cheering me on, I would not be anywhere near where I am right now. I would be probably in a gutter somewhere, lost and confused, no idea what the heck is going on in life. I certainly wouldn't have a savings account, that's for sure, because I didn't know what one of those was.
Understood. And question for you, when your wife is able to retire next year, will you guys, sounds like you're entertaining working together. Do you think that'll happen? And what's her desire?
We are entertaining it. She is actually still trying to understand what her desire is, right? What I want most of all is for her to be a mom. That's something she hasn't really been able to truly do on a day-to-day basis. If there is room after she is just fully pouring into our kids, we won't have a need for an au pair anymore. It'll be mom at home and just loving life together as a team. So if she has room in her space that she wants to jump into that, then I'm all about it. If she just really wants to settle in and teach the kids Spanish and take over the homeschool and just be a mom, then I'm perfectly fine with that as well. So we'll see how it goes out. God will direct us one way or another. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I'll just share that was that's going to be a great gift for your wife, the age of your children. And it was a great gift for us in 2021. Jody is loving it. And it's really incredible that she has that opportunity, because she obviously loved her profession, and that was something that she had to figure out. But she loves being able to pour in completely to the family even more.
Yeah, there is this identity thing of this: who am I without that job, without that profession? In my wife's case, without that uniform, who am I? Which is why I'm constantly encouraging her about being a mom, because you're not a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. You are, right? But none of that means anything. You're a solid, amazing Christian mom and wife who loves being around her family. So focus on that part. And then whatever comes along the side of that, then that's fine. Like, your identity is not found in what clothes you put on. So your identity is found way deeper than that. And that was difficult for me, jumping ship from the military. I left the military twice. I left once as an enlisted guy, went to college, ended up getting married, and then went back as an officer. And then I got tired again, and I said, now it's time for me to go. So I had I felt like it was doubly that way for me the second time around, because I didn't even have a chance to find an identity outside of the military before I went back into the military. I was only out for a couple of years going to college. So to jump right back in, it was like, no, this is all I know. This is all I can do. And it was just a lot of work for me to get over that mentally, and sometimes still breaking through that barrier. Here I am a couple of years later. You and I will have to chat offline again and talk to maybe our wives chat, so my wife can get some pointers from your wife on how that transition was and how to take advantage of that as best as possible.
I am super thrilled to talk to John Laney, a fellow military veteran. You've been married for 19 years, so clearly you are doing something correctly. Obviously, we are all doing things incorrectly, but what would you say has been like a key to those 19 years of, she's dealt with you through the military, she's now dealing with you as an entrepreneur and a dad. What do you liken that success to thus far?
It's a good question. That's a good question. Yeah. So we do have 19 years of, like you said, marital bliss. I don't know, man. I would say the commitment to the relationship, the commitment to the family, the commitment that our family is bigger than our marriage, is bigger than ourselves, and our family is bigger than our marriage, and our community is bigger than our family. So just keeping that in perspective is that, there's things I don't want to do, but I do it for the sake of the marriage. Maybe the marriage doesn't want to do it, but they do it for the sake of the community. Or they do it for the sake of the family, might not want to do it, but we do it for the sake of the community. And I say this is more aspirational than we're not always 100%, we're not always 50% on actually doing this, but I think a key, maybe not even to my success, but a key to my drive and focus is knowing that there are bigger things out there than you, and bigger thing, and knowing what is bigger than what. And it's not, you are more important than the community, and you're more important than your family, and you're more important than your marriage, and you're more important than your school. That's, you do that, and you end up acting in such a way that is quite distasteful when people see it online on a YouTube short.
Yeah, of course.
Of a young person acting in such a way that they are far more important than anything else.
Yeah. So I want to dig into a couple of things there, just so I can wrap my brain around it. You had mentioned like the thing the Navy says, shipmate, and then yourself. One of the themes that has happened multiple times, because the way that I usually tell people what my priorities are and how my kids know that my priorities, my wife know my priorities, it's my God, my wife, and then my kids. And then everything else is below that. Something that I've been hammered at multiple times by multiple of my guests here is that I don't put myself anywhere in that list. And if I don't take care of myself, then how am I going to actually show up for my wife the way I need to? How am I going to actually show up for my kids the way I need to? And I was curious how, and this is one thing that I struggled with the military, if I'm completely honest, is they didn't necessarily care about the individual. And I don't blame them. They don't need to care about the individual. But when all you're doing is telling people that they need to care about their ship and their shipmate over themselves, then we end up with a lot of very beat up people. So I'm curious how your translation went, or how you saw that in the military, and then how you translate that in society with your family to make sure that we don't end up with beat up kids as well.
Yeah, great question. I wish I had given that some thought before this.
Too bad. These are on the spot.
Yeah, dude. So I would assert that if you've got those priorities in order, shipmate self, community, family self, that there is a level of responsibility that the community has over taking care of individuals. So I remember many times as an XO, many closed door decisions about people that had either come back from deployment or were like going to get married or wanted to have a kid or for whatever reason, they had issues and they needed some self-care, some self-love, whatever, or some community love. We'll say community. They needed some love from the community. And man, I would, and those were hard decisions. And I believe that for the most part, we made the right decision by taking care of the individual when the individual needed taken care of. For example, I want to do my XO ride. I want to build a community in such a way that I live in that community. I want to hire my EAs and I want to hire my employees and I want to work in such a way that people want to continue to do business with me. And if I work in such a way that I always put community first and I always put the person down below community, then people are not going to want to continue to do business or continue to play the game with me. Play the game in such a way that you want to keep playing the as part of infinite. That's part of Simon Sinek the infinite game. And so I guess it's two different perspectives when I look at how I'm going to deal with things external than to me. I do the God, community, family, kids. When I look at how I'm going to deal with others, I do it in terms of how I am by interacting with the man on the street, by interacting with my assistants, by interacting with people I'm doing real estate business with. I am manifesting the community that I want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
I am picking up a hitchhiker. Like, what kind of community do I want? By helping somebody in need. What kind of community? I want to be in a community where people do that. And so I am building that community by doing those little things.
Okay. So it's less about the priority and more about the interaction between them, if what I'm hearing is correct, because by having that interaction with your community in a way that shows the community means a lot to you, it creates the community around it. It helps foster the fact that the community means a lot. So it's not necessarily, or maybe I'm misspeaking on this, but it's not necessarily that the community is above, but it's that when we interact with the community in the way that we want the community to be interacting with us, it creates the community that we all want and need around us.
Yeah.
That sound accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds great. That sounds accurate.
Yeah.
No,
go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know if you can really put that when viewing yourself in the shipmate self hierarchy. I don't know if you can do that. Man, here's something I heard. Okay. All models are wrong. Every map is wrong, but some of them are useful. And I'd say the shipmate self, God, wife, kids, community, like that hierarchy is wrong. It's wrong, but it can be useful. And so I think if you look at it from a certain angle, an angle of what do I need to do in many situations, and you prioritize it with that shipmate self priority, then while it may not be accurate 100% of the time, which means it's wrong, it can still be useful. It can still be useful at times.
Yeah.
The map is not the environment. Fine General Patton said that.
I am super excited to chat with Darren Light.
When Penny and I were going through pre-marriage counseling, which we did not do in our previous marriages, we chose a Christian counselor who had been divorced. And the reason we chose that Christian counselor is because I will say, and he described himself as this way. Number one, he's divorced. Number two, he had some life on him. And he could bring as much spiritual perspective as we wanted to our counseling. And so that's two of the biggest reasons why we chose him. We would get into counseling, and oftentimes the phrase, what if, would be brought up. And he would correct us and say, you have got to use the phrase, even if this happens. It's not what if. Because you can't say, it's a total different perspective only with the use of one word. And it makes perfect sense. Even if this tornado comes through and knocks our house down and we're alive, then we can regroup and live another day.
Yep.
Even if this $1 million deal doesn't go through, but yet I still have the time freedom that I do now, but I don't really have the true money freedom yet, because we know money freedom generally follows time freedom, I can still go on and work towards that deal next time. That just stood out to me for whatever that's worth to the audience.
Yeah, I love the thought there, the perspective, because it does, as you were saying that, I'm thinking, okay, even if, because there is this thing called till death do us part, right? Too many people are at the until such scenario happens that I can walk away from you. And it's become much more beautiful to just be like, okay, I have the freedom to just get a divorce whenever I want to. Like, that's just become a beautiful thing in the society. And it's so easy. And it's okay. So you have zero desire for commitment, like, is what you're telling me. And like, it's become fashionable these days to talk about how it's okay to just divorce whenever you want to. And it's no, even if, because it's going to happen. You're going to have trials. You're going to have problems. There's going to be issues. Somebody's, just like we were talking about before, the humans are going to fail you. They always will. That's the one constant in this world, is that we are going to fail each other. It's just going to happen. It's our response to the failure, both by the failed and the person who failed and the person who was failed. So those two responses mean a ton, right? And so going through, my wife and I have been talking about doing the same thing that you were talking about doing. Is we've been married for 14 years now. And one of the biggest things that we loved about the beginning of our relationship after we just got married was a small group that we were in for young married couples. And it was enormous for us to be a part of. Now, granted, this couple was together for 28 years or something like that, 25 years when they were running it. But I think that my wife and I have got a large amount of experience in our 14 years that has helped us a ton, that we'd love to be able to pass on to newly married or engaged couples and be able to do that, because man, oh man, is it just a completely different world when you get that perspective from that person that you talked about, like that counselor that you went to. What a difference that it's going to be. And then to have somebody that can consistently be in your life after that, what you're trying to be for other couples, to consistently be in their life, to know, no, like, even if something bad happens, you're still married, you still have each other, you still work through it.
I am super excited to talk to Jay Bourgana. So now I want to definitely dig into the family side of the things, right? So now you've got 2 kids. What kind of conversations have you and Jen at this point, just now having kids, you're in real estate, you've come back from a couple months in Paris, like what kind of conversations pre and post those, like having kids, did you have on what your intent was with kids, like what your lifestyle you wanted, how you wanted to raise the kids? What kind of conversations you guys have around that?
Yeah, dude, it's really interesting because we had that conversation our first date.
Nice.
And literally the first date. And the reason why is because my wife was a teacher at the time. And just me, I'm curious. I asked a million questions. So we sat and I was really curious. I had my ideas about the education system in the United States, but I wasn't in it. So it was interesting to have that conversation with someone who's in it and talking about kids are raised. And literally after that conversation, we left that restaurant and we went to another bar, and I was holding her hand. Like literally, I remember this, thinking that this is the mother of my children on my first date, like halfway through the date. And so I figured that we were aligned, that she was very open-minded. She wasn't stuck to the orthodoxy of being a part of the teachers union in California. Yeah. So she was flexible in terms of her thinking. So I knew that I wanted to have kids. I knew that I didn't want, I'm very open-minded. So I didn't want to do it just like everybody else, just because that's how everybody else did it. So again, we started with the whole concept of no one knew anything and just question everything. And so the conversations for us were from day one. And essentially how, where, values, everything, the way we live, everything. All our conversations are around how to think through something as opposed to just what so-and-so did so we can do the same thing.
Is Jen from California? Born and raised?
She's multiple generations.
How does one that is born and raised in California, goes to college there, becomes a school teacher there, have unorthodox, non-indoctrinated views on school and education? How did that happen?
Good question. I'm not sure. I think she also felt like her parents didn't really do a great job thinking through everything they did throughout their life. So she also had these questions around how she grew up, and her parents stayed together, lived in the same house for 45
50 years, but she always had these questions around, have they done it right? And she always had, So I guess I found the one person in Southern California.
The only teacher in California who does not get indoctrinated in you.
But here's the thing. At the time when we met, it was like 2011. California was a mess. They were essentially. So now I remember,
still are.
Yeah. But I'm talking about in terms of like education teachers, they were literally every year at the end of the season, they will hand the pink slip to the teachers. At the end of the school year, they literally fire all the teachers, and then the teachers had to reapply for their job the following year. And it was all remaining from that 2008 GFC period where there's no money, there's no nothing. So literally and I couldn't understand that. I was like, how do you fire a teacher? This is like one of the most valuable jobs in society. It's like, how do you fire a teacher? And coming from where I come from Morocco, we had the saying that the teacher is someone who almost was a prophet. It's like the same level.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's like that one person who almost became a prophet, who almost was a prophet, something like that. So it's so valuable. How do you treat teachers like that? If you treat teachers like that, how are these teachers going to treat your kids? So that was like part of the beginning and the end, essentially, for her in terms of the education system in the United States. And so that's how it went.
Okay. So then, how long did she stay a teacher after having kids?
Oh, as soon as she was pregnant, like I would say probably 3 months before Isabel was born, she was quit. She quit.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So you guys definitely had some of those conversations. I don't know. This is not what we want.
No. Yeah. I'm totally against, having kids separate from their mother. We don't do nannies. We didn't do any, nothing. So it's just not even family. It's like secure attachments, be there, kids on you. Like I remember watching kids hanging on their mother's back while they're doing stuff and cleaning or shopping or whatever, even in the farms. Like I remember seeing women working in the farm with a kid in the back.
Yeah.
Attached to them.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I remember walking around, I was in Niger for a while, and that was the same thing there. You could see them constantly. They're working, they're selling their stuff, their kids on their back, strapped in with the clothing and hanging out back there, just chilling. No complaints in the world.
Yeah.
And it's funny because right now, so I work from home. My wife is still in the military, so she's got 1 year left before she retires. And so by the time our au pair gets off of work and my wife gets home, it's me and the 3 kids. My 2 older ones, they're pretty self-sufficient. I can tell them to go do something, they go do it. But I've got a 1-year-old little girl, not the most self-sufficient kid in the world. She needs a little bit more, right? So here I am, and you're saying that, and that was me all the time. I've got this little hiking backpack that I used to use for my oldest is when we first bought it. And now it's gone through 3 kids, but I just toss her in the back of the hiking backpack, and I'm cooking dinner, and I'm taking the dog out, and I'm doing all the stuff in the house. Raquel will come home and she's, what is happening? And I'm like, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. I can't chase a 1-year-old around and do all the stuff right now that needs to be done to get ready for dinner.
I think there's value to that. Beans don't grow. They don't come out already fully grown. They're still growing outside. I was just watching this video around the teenager brain and how the frontal cortex doesn't develop until in mid-20s.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's crazy. So, how do you expect the kid? The frontal cortex is the part where the decision making, where you hold yourself from doing something stupid, the risk taking, all that stuff is right there and doesn't develop until mid-20s.
Yeah.
So now imagine, so the kids, the little kids, they're still developing. They're still want to be attached to their parent. They want to be close to their parents. So when you have that separation, it creates this break. And I see it everywhere. I see it in these kids everywhere. So for me, it was intuitive. It's not like I studied a lot of this stuff. It was just intuitive. It's I've seen this before. I want kids to be with their mother at all, doing their thing. But thank God my wife loves it. She always wanted to be a mom. She always wanted to be with the kids at home. So it worked out for us.
I am super excited to finally have Matt Donnelly on. How do you and your wife, you guys have been married for 12 years, how do you guys stay on track with the business side, with the kids side? Like, what is your communication style like? How do you guys make sure that you guys are on the same page as you're moving through all of these situations and these new ventures with the kids in business?
Yeah, I think the main thing is we're definitely a partnership when it comes to raising the kids. As far as the business goes, he has no idea all the different things that happen in order to maintain the business and the different trials and tribulations I go through on a daily basis. And I have zero desire to relive that when I get home and tell those stories, right? When I get home, I just want to be a husband and a dad.
And what do you guys focus on with communication wise as far as actual parenting? Like, how do you guys get on the same page to make sure that you guys are rowing in the same direction on how to parent?
Yeah, we have the same values for sure. So a lot of that value stuff and how we want to raise our kids already align. Where maybe we misalign sometimes is I'm way more on the health kick, where she's like, oh, fine, like she'll pick up crappy food for them or whatever. And I'm like,
yeah,
crappy food. We don't have crappy food to get crappy food. Dumb minutia fights all the time on different things. The big stuff is what we're super aligned on.
Okay. Was that something you guys discussed before you had kids, or did you guys figure that out as you were raising kids?
Just who we are as people, probably what attracted us to one another is just having those core values. And we parent almost the same way just because that's how we're both wired.
Yeah. So I've been encouraging folks for a little while to get core value, like literally write down core values for your family so that you guys all are working off the same page. And you're using the word core values. Is that something that is like an intentional thing? Have you guys written down core values for the family? Or is that just something that you guys have internally just worked through together?
We definitely wrote them down at some point in time. It was like a fan abundance event. We wrote them down. It's not something that we have hung up and we look at. So I don't even remember what we wrote down. I just know our core values are essentially the same. What we care about, the type of children that we want to raise, just naturally aligns really well.
Yeah. And I think that to me, that's one of those things that having the conversations early and knowing that you guys align on the big things before you get married, to me, it increases your chance of success drastically. Like in business, we run an EOS in our business, so we hire and fire based off our core values. If people don't meet the core values, then there's no point in having the business. It doesn't mean they're going to be a bad worker. It doesn't mean they're not going to achieve things. It just means they don't match our core values. So like, how much more important is it in your relationship with your spouse, like that you're aligned on those core values to know that you guys are in the right direction?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that EOS, fortunately, has become very big now. It's becoming more and more popular.
Yeah.
That's probably going to have a big impact on a lot of future relationships, right? The more popular it becomes. We just had our EOS day with our implementer yesterday. So we started this year implementing EOS, and it's awesome. So I wish I had those tools when I started my business or when you start your relationship.
Yeah, I don't get it. Thank you so much for jumping in today. I am thrilled to be chatting with John Edwin. So how is it that you two started to work together, and how do you make sure that you do balance each other out without wanting to go to fisticuffs by the end of the day?
We started, so she really wanted to stay home when we were having kids. And I guess she was forced into it because I was working like 70 hours a week as a trainer. And then I was also buying properties and I was also managing the contractors. I couldn't do the financial part because it was only so many hours in a day. I was like super stretched. So she started out she took a QuickBooks course early on, like 20 years ago. And then she just stayed with it. And as we grew, she was able to continue to grow and work through the books. As far as like arguments, we know each other pretty well. Like we'll bicker, but we don't have too many arguments, thank God, around money. I hear that that's the number one thing is finances that couples argue about. And we'll argue. There's times where I remember this one time we had a terrible property management company in Scranton, which is where we buy most of our properties. And we had like 20% vacancy. And I just kept like putting more and more properties under agreement. And she's like, we can't put more and more properties under agreement until we stabilize this portfolio because we're losing money. Like we're hemorrhaging money right now. And we were in the process of firing that property management company and hiring a new one.
but she was really wise in that. And so we literally sat on our hands for a few months, and I hate to sit on my hands, but we had to take a sideline approach and stabilize the portfolio. And once it got fully rented again, we were up and running. But really, we're pretty in tune with one another. If she tells me like, hey, we need to pay some attention over this side, then I'll pay more attention to it and we'll get it right.
So I think that there is obviously that common statement that finances are like the number one reason for divorce and that type of thing. But I think it comes back to communication and communication around whatever it is that oftentimes finances, right? If I'm seeing an issue with the money and then I don't communicate that well, then that can turn into much larger arguments. But what it sounds like to me is that both of you guys respect each other enough to understand and hear the other person when they're speaking and say, okay, clearly there's something there I'm not seeing, versus like feeling as a accusatory, no, you're stopping us from being successful by not letting me go get this other thing under contract. It's okay, let me take a step back and trust that my wife has our best interest in mind as well, because you guys have practiced that communication over the years. And I'm completely assuming here, so that's where I want to throw it back to you and get your thoughts on that.
That's 100% right. You got to communicate. You're absolutely right. I think that big arguments could be small arguments if you communicate when you're feeling that pressure or that stress.
Yeah.
We do weekly meetings where her and I will sit down and go over all of our bank accounts, our businesses, what's up, what's down. And that, I think, is a key to couples working together, is making sure if you and I are in business together, Adam, we're going to sit down and we're going to have meetings, right? It's important for us to know, I need to know where you're going and what your goals are. You need to know where I'm going or where my goals are. And Christine and I are the same way. We sit down and we go over our finances. Like, I think we should go this direction. And then there's that compromise also where we agree. And sometimes we agree to disagree, Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same point, even if you're agreeing to disagreeing, it's the fact that you guys have both said your parts. You guys have had the communication about it. You guys understand where each other are coming to. You just know that you come to different conclusions. And it's okay to come to different conclusions as long as you still are respecting the other party. That's when there starts to be a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for, resentment in the communication and resentment in the agreeing to disagreeing. Oh, I'm just agreeing to disagree because I can't stand whatever. So no. Now you're well on a path to having a divorce over finances, when truly it was about your inability to communicate with each other. And that's, to me, I think that's the key.
Important. That's the key, is the resentment. If there's resentment in a relationship, that's cancer that will grow rapidly. And if there is that resentment as a husband and wife, you really need to communicate. And if you can't come to an agreement, you need to hire a professional to teach you certain tools, and also to be an intermediary to help out with that resentment, because resentment will absolutely kill a relationship.